Behaviourism. Behaviourism is the science that suggests if we are to understand people, we should study their behaviours. It originates back in the late 19th century with the work of John Watson, famous theorist who worked later with some other theorists to talk about how positive and negative experiences can shape our behaviours. Behaviourists would believe that behaviours can be controlled through a process of operant conditioning. This conditioning suggested the following. Positive conditioning, or reinforcers, can extrinsically reinforce a behaviour after the desired behaviour is exhibited, making the behaviour more likely to happen in the future. For example, a child receives payment for doing work. Negative reinforcement occurs when a certain stimulus, usually a stimulus that is disliked, is removed after a particular behaviour is exhibited. The likelihood of the particular behaviour occurring again in the future is increased because of removing or avoiding the negative consequence. For example, Julie does the dishes in order to stop the mother from nagging her to do so. Positive punishment works by presenting an unpleasant or aversive consequence after the undesired behaviour is exhibited, making the behaviour less likely to happen in the future. Examples of positive punishment might see that a child might touch a hot stove, the behaviour, and feels pain, the aversive stimulus that would discourage him from doing it again, or her. Negative punishment, however, happens when a certain reinforcing stimulus is removed after a particular undesired behaviour is exhibited, resulting in the behaviour happening less often in the future. A child kicks his peer or friend and is removed from his favourite activity. Both Watson and Skinner looked in their study of behaviourism to cure different psychological conditions such as anxiety and social challenges through this operant conditioning. Pavlov's experiments with dogs. Pavlov was the first to introduce us to the notion of conditioning. He would use a metronome with food which would cause the dog to salivate in the presence of food. Soon the dog would salivate at just the sound of the metronome. Similarly, however, the dogs would not repeat the behaviours if the reward of food was withdrawn. Later, Skinner was the one who was most famous for his experiments with rats. Skinner believed that behaviours would be repeated if followed by pleasant consequences. To test his theory, he placed a rat in a box. The rat would roam around the box, and after several attempts, the rat would accidentally bump into a lever, which, when depressed, would release food. After more experiments, the rat would go straight to the lever to get the food. Similarly, he placed a rat inside a box with mild electric current. He moved around the box until he accidentally knocked a lever, which turned the current off. So he would learn to go straight to the lever in order not to get that mild electric shock. Much later, in the later part of the 20th century, in the 1970s, a famous and controversial theorist by the name of Michel Foucault published a very famous work on discipline and punishment. In this book, Foucault suggested that discipline and punishment creates docile bodies ideal for the industrial age. He suggested that it was an imperative that strict discipline happens with careful observation. Students would be prepared for the military if they learned to obey and do as they were told. This would in turn prepare them for an industrial age. Today, many educators or teachers still rely on this behaviourist model in the classroom. Having discussed the above, how is behaviourism noticed in classes today? Have a think about it. Or how is behaviourism, or how was behaviourism noticed in your classrooms when you were a student? Was this kind of education useful? Why? Why not? Have a think about, for example, the layout of your classroom. Food for thought.